Thanks for clicking on Wayne.com for another edition of Inside the Zone alongside Blake Sebring of the News Sentinel. I'm Glenn Marini, and if you looked at the ECHL standings today, you might be shocked to find that the Comets are not alone in first place. In fact, they're tied with Toledo, and Toledo has played 2 fewer games than the Comets, so, you know, when that's all said and done, maybe everything even, you'd see Toledo at number 1.
And I think it's going to be important, too, because, I mean, you know those teams are going to play in the playoffs.
Yep.
You hope those teams play in the playoffs, too. So home ice advantage, you know, may or may not mean that much, but it'd be fun to see 4 games here as a fan instead of just 3.
Before we really get into the week, how did the Comets match up with Toledo? Because they're 1-2-1 against Toledo so far this year. That one victory is the outdoor game in Toledo, which, based on the conditions and everything, you can kind of throw that out of the equation. It's a little bit of an outlier. So how would you say the Comets match up against Toledo? Because, like you said, it's looking like a collision course sometime in the postseason between these two powers.
Comets are bigger. Toledo's faster. The problem for the Comets is they try to outskate Toledo, and that leads to disaster. They think they're faster than Toledo, and it takes them a period and a half to get it through their heads that the scouting report was right and Toledo's faster. So it'll be interesting to see how they adjust over the next few months.
Well, they've got some moving parts in place to the Comets, as always with call-ups and signings and different things, but specifically this past weekend they made some changes in the forward position, some guys placed on reserve, and they added a player. So talk about the moves, especially in the forward positions for the Comets that are going to be seen throughout this week.
Well, Friday night, Thomas Frazee and Garrett Mears took some really bad penalties late in the third period. It killed their chances for a comeback. And so they got put on reserve for Saturday, and they played Drew Daniels up front. And they played Phil Bushbacher up front, too. And they went that way, and it worked out. They only gave up 19 shots on goal, which was even better considering that they got the first 5 shots against, and that really shut Wheeling down after that. And it was 2-0, and after midway through the first period. So the Comets really turned the tables on the Nailers from Friday night.
Brock Higgs, they add a center. You were talking about it last week. If they could add one piece, they needed to add a center. They got it. What does he bring to the table, and how does he kind of set everything else up in terms of the lines to make this a more successful Comets unit as a whole?
Well, we'll see. He's going to get a shot. He's been with Reading already this year, and he was with South Carolina. But the interesting thing about Brock is he's a left-handed center, which they didn't have. They need another left-handed shot. He's a right-handed center, left-handed shot. So they needed that on the power play because everything is all tilted to one side with the way the power play is working right now. So this will give him a little bit more balance on the power play too. Plus he's a natural center. They've been playing C.J. Severin at center. They've been playing Matthew Pistilli at center. And, you know, they've been doing their best and doing a great job, but you got to get some face-off draws, you know, and hopefully Paul Crowder will be back within a week or two. And then you've got natural centers, and that really helps up and down the lineup.
You mentioned C.J. Severin had a big game on Saturday, 4 points. First 4-point game by a Comet this entire season. It was kind of hard to believe, but they've been very balanced.
Well, he's been really balanced, too.
Yeah, but what was the key to him? And can he be a guy through the course of the second half of the season that maybe takes a bigger role going forward?
I think that's what they're hoping for. They're hoping to get him off and get him going, get some confidence going. And playing center, he was much more involved with the handling of the puck, and much more down the center of the ice, obviously, and that really seemed to get him going. But he's had a really good 10 games. He's had just about a point a game during that time, and he's really started to get on a roll now, which is interesting because usually he's been playing with the third line, the checking line, and so when he's playing center, he's playing on the second line because Brett Perlini is the third line checking center. So we'll see what happens if this keeps him going now.
Sean Sidlowski, back from the AHL, made an immediate impact this weekend. What does it mean to have him back in the fold, considering Eric Fye is still up there, and they're also looking, you know, for Pat Nagel to come back at some point?
Well, you could see that he and Mike Embach, you can just see the chemistry they have, and they played Drew Daniels with them on Saturday night, and Drew got a goal Friday night, and that was a forward goal too. Basically, he got to the front of the net for a rebound. You can just see that when they have the puck, the other team's like on their heels. They got to back up. They got to be aware of them. So that immediately it's tilted ice, and just because they handle the puck so well together, and that really, really made a difference. And you know, when guys come back from the AHL, they're playing at a different level. They're a step faster probably. Their hands are a little more sure. they're just used to playing at a higher tempo, higher level, and it really pays off when they get down.
I mentioned Pat Nagel. Comets fans want to know, when is he going to be back? When is he going to be back? Got a win against Utica for Grand Rapids this past weekend, playing pretty well up there.
Yeah.
So when is he going to be back is the ultimate question.
I don't know. Jimmy Howard's hurt in Detroit, and it's all trickled down from there. As soon as Jimmy Howard gets back, you'll probably see it trickle back down, shuffle back down, and Pat might probably end up back here. I think Pat will be here sometime, but you just got to wait and see.
And talk about the job that Roman Will has done, and also the job that Garrett Barrett has done. 2-0 so far this season for the Comets.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of Friday's game, and Roman gave up 5 goals. One was a 5-on-3. That was the game winner, which is just really bad. Not his fault. You just can't have a 5-on-3 in the third period. And then the first 2 goals were odd man rushes, like 2 minutes in. And it's like you can't really blame the goalie for that either. So, I mean, he did okay. He battled. I think he might have been a little tired, which was a great reason to start Garrett. And Garrett played great. They gave up 19 shots, and he stopped 18 of them. So, I mean, he did his job.
All right, as far as Kaylee Schrott goes, this is something we touched on last week, and we got out there, talked to him a little bit in practice last week. He's got the cage on. He seems to be doing more and more as his rehab progresses, but where's the timeline for him at this point, and what's realistic as far as him getting back on the ice and being a solid contributor, not only on the ice, but more importantly in the locker room during game time?
I don't know. I'm not sure he knows yet. It just depends on when he can get his legs going. And a lot of people don't understand why the Comets need him back. He's got 2 goals. He's a fighter. He gets a lot of penalty minutes. But it's like the Yankees. Derek Jeter didn't hit 300 this year, but it was still Derek Jeter's team. It's still Schrocky's team. I mean, and that's the way the guys look at it. I don't care what the fans think or say. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant compared to what the guys in the room say. And that's what's important. And that's why they need him back. And Paul, too.
Kaylee is not going to like that analogy as the Boston Red Sox fan. You know,
I
you should
know,
have said like Nomar,
I know.
or David Ortiz, or something like that. You went Jeter.
I know.
That really cuts to the core of a guy.
And I did it on
Red Sox
purpose
fan.
too. You know, I mean, because I knew I would hear about that from him.
That's critical. Gary,
I mean, that's how tough I am. You know? How brave I am.
Speaking of brave, Gary Graham has made a lot of brave decisions, putting the guys on reserve. Where would you rate him at this point this season as a head coach in the ECHL as opposed to at this point last year? What are the strides? Because we've talked a lot about it. The coaching has improved, and he's gotten much better.
Well, it's hard for me to judge, you know, compared to the other coaches. You don't know what they've gone through. But I will say that Gary has definitely matured and evolved as a coach this year. He's relying much more on his leadership council, and he's much more willing to take a step back and be more analytical, possibly, and kind of let things play themselves out. Now you're in first place with such a great start. You can kind of afford to do that. So it'll be interesting to see how I thought it was a great move, benching the players he did Saturday night. I mean, if that doesn't get their attention, really nothing is going to. And with other guys coming back, you don't want to be off the ice for any time at all, seriously, because you might be sitting for a long time.
You do not want to be Wally pipped.
No.
Talking a little bit about the schedule this week, Elmira coming in on Friday. Finally, the Comets are home after playing a lot of road games, thanks to the Shriner Circus, which we went to, which was awesome, by the way. That's a personal note. Friday, Elmira at home. Saturday, it's Toledo at home. So finally, you get to play at home. Sometimes that can be more difficult, as we've talked about in the past, but having played on the road and getting a chance to be back home, how big of a weekend is it for the Comets? Because, you know, counting the break of the All-Star game, or for the All-Star game, you're talking about they lost 3 of their last 4. They want to get this ship righted. I'm not trying to be Chicken Little and say the sky is falling.
No, but they
want
ever
to
since
ride it.
Kaylee got hurt, I think they're 12-6-3. So they're 12-9. You know, that's not the same pace they were on, okay? And you want to recapture that, and especially when you have fewer games coming up than the teams right behind you or right with you, like Toledo. That Toledo game is huge. They really need to win that, or they're going to be behind for the rest of the way, possibly, in the division. And we know that they're going to play them in the playoffs because the first 2 rounds are within the division. So that's a huge, huge game. Now, you can't look past Elmira to look at that either. And part of the thing that they have struggled with of late is getting started in the first period. I mean, they didn't even get off the bus at all on Friday night in Wheeling. I mean, they might as well just have given them 2 goals and said, hey, we'll meet you the second period. Saturday night, they came out great. You know, even though they got outshot 5-0 in the first 2 minutes, you know, they came back and settled down and got it going. Now, that's been a big problem at home. You know, they play down to the level of competition or whatever you want to say, or it just takes them a while to get their legs going. I think they've outscored opponents 60-34 in the second period, which is astonishing.
Wow.
The sad thing is they really needed that 26-goal difference to really keep it going, you know, or 20 or 30-goal difference. You know, I mean, they've really needed that because they've usually struggled so much in the first period. Now, we'll see. You've had the whole week to get planned for that game. You know Gary will have that game plan down solid, perfect. Now you've got to do it. Now, you've also got to see, does Paul come back this week? It's possible. Does Kaylee come back this week? It's possible. Okay, then who sits out? What are the lines then? You know, and how does that all fit?
When does Michael Tam get back?
Yep.
That's also a big question.
Yeah,
mark.
I mean, he's ahead of schedule, but you know, with a shoulder surgery that major, it's all depends on what the doctor says.
All right. Well, it could be a very interesting weekend with 2 home games for the Comets.
For the next 5 at home.
Yeah,
too.
and we'll talk about it next Monday on Inside the Zone. But for this week, he's Blake, I'm Glenn, and we'll see you next week.